There he is. And good morning and welcome to the Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Open Space Subcommittee. I'm your chair, Regina T. Boyce, and we will be discussing two bills in this half hour. We're going to be most importantly taking up Senate Bill 674 that has a cross file, but it is, I believe, in rules. And so we're going to go ahead and get underway. This is the abandoned or sunken vessels and waterway improvement funds. We heard this. My days are crossed. We heard this yesterday, I believe. Kristen, you ready to go?
Sure. So yes, Senate Bill 674. It does, I think, three things. First, it requires DNR to distribute at least $250,000 from the Waterway Improvement Fund to a qualifying statewide Maryland-based historic preservation nonprofit organization to establish a maritime heritage competitive grant program. The bill also modifies requirements and processes for DNR to contact vessel owners during emergencies and when seizing or taking custody of abandoned or sunken vessels. And then finally, the bill authorizes DNR to establish a voluntary vessel turn-in program.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. I know there were some questions about the Heritage Fund, and if I can remember from my notes, there were some questions about I think Delegate Holmes had asked, like, essentially, like when we take these ships, what are we doing with them? Where do they go? And I think I believe Dylan is maybe on the call, but they said they have a place where they keep abandoned boats, and then I guess for the fiberglass boats, they just cut them up and then I guess properly dispose of them. Is Dylan on?
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Yeah, that's correct.
that is correct. I do want to. I'm sorry, Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If Dylan's on there, could you briefly tell me how this process, it says something about the money goes to a nonprofit and then it's distributed there. Does that go to, like, if you got a sunken vessel, does that go to a contractor? Tell me how that works there.
If I may, I think that part of the bill, it's separate from the abandoned or sunken vessels. It's creating a grant program for maritime heritage programs. So like an educational history type of program that would probably be implemented by the Maryland Historical Trust.
Right. I guess the other question is would they, Delegate Jacobs, I mean, somewhat of your area, I've been to, like, the Waterman's, for instance, museum, and then there you have the oh gosh, I'm forgetting about the African American museum. I think it's in Talbot's. I have the brochure. I'm looking at it from here. I can't remember the name. Water's Edge, I believe, museum. So I guess the question is could places like that apply for these types of grants for whatever it's additional research or additional artifact or additions to, like, those type of museums? Oh, I'm sorry, Dylan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Kristen said. I think they're not real. It's a kind of a separate thing in the bill. It's not related to the abandoned boats, Delegate Jacobs. It's a maritime preservation history grant, lighthouses, museums, like the chair was talking about, all that type of stuff.
That's why I was trying to get that straight, because that was a little bit confusing to me. And they're two different vehicles moving there. So how are we? So people can just say, I don't want my boat anymore, and then what?
So for the voluntary vessel turn-in program, I think this bill kind of sets up the framework, and then the department internally will develop regulations around it. I think we're we'd spend the next few months trying to figure out exactly what it'll look like. I think, we'd want to figure out if it's means tested, because I don't know I think it'll be a much larger program if we allow every single person in the world to turn in their vote just when they don't want it. But there's a lot of questions, but this bill sets up the framework and gives the statutory authority to DNR to be able to move forward with the creation of said program.
And the framework is also going to be dealing with boats that are already sunken, that the owner didn't voluntarily turn it in, but it's sunken. Like some of the bill hearings we had this year, is it dealing with those at all?
Well, I think that's kind of the other part. That's kind of what the other part of the bill is focused on. I guess think of it, you have a boat before it becomes abandoned and a hazard, and then you have it after. I think what you're talking about right now is kind of the after the fact, and I don't think this bill is going to do a ton to change that, but through the front end, through ensuring the proper communication and giving us additional tools, and through the creation of the voluntary turn-in program, the hope is to mitigate most of these before they actually become the environmental or navigational hazard, if that makes sense.
Well, I understand that. I know for years and years and years, we've been trying to remedy the sunken abandoned vehicles. Vessels. And this doesn't do a great deal to deal with those, the abandoned vessels. This is more about the voluntary turn in and then creating these programs.
Yeah, and I think, I'll reiterate it. I think this is not the end of the conversation around this. It's a bipartisan issue that is across the state, and from Delegate Naraki on the committee, there's a salvage title issue. There's a lot of other things that we're going to keep working on and pushing over the interim.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the question about that because I know we want to update the physical mailing addresses and being able to contact these individuals through other means. But I think when I was reading this and looking at it was amended to address non-registered boats. Correct?
Yeah. I can. Do you want me to answer?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So through conversations with Delegate Allen and Delegate Ahrens and Queen Anne's County,
Right.
And Senator Hershey, they had another bill related to abandoned boats.
Right.
So kind of the compromise, not compromise, but the other idea that got put in this bill was giving DNR the authority to, I guess in Queen Anne's County in particular, there's a creek, for example, where there's boats that have been there for a while that they're tied to a piling, so they're not quote unquote abandoned as the definition meets it. But what this bill would do if passed with the amendment, it would give the Natural Resource Police the authority to place a sticker on that vessel.
That's right.
And that with like a deadline to contact the department, otherwise your vessel will be deemed abandoned, to ensure that there's an additional tool in the toolbox for getting these vessels deemed abandoned that cause Marylanders a ton of problems. Right. And then the issue then goes to if there is no person or persons attached to the boat that is abandoned, then it's just DNR whenever they could, whatever resources just would remove, take it to your place, store it, cut it up, do whatever it is, and then get rid of it. Yep. Okay. Any other questions regarding SB 674? Is there a motion? Is there a desire to have a motion to move the bill?
Yeah. Can I move the bill, Madam Chair?
Yes, you can. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of reporting favorably signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any additional discussions or clarifications? Okay.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I
Yes.
do have one thing to add, just because even though it's a special fund, it does we have to go through the fiscal approval
Yes, ma'am.
process with appropriations, and it
Yes.
has been sent to them.
Yep.
It's in their queue. So
Yes. The 250?
You're right, for the
Yeah.
money from the
Right.
Waterway Improvement Fund.
Yeah, and can I make an actual clarification? I just remembered this because I had to go back. I forget, I typed notes in the floor system. That the fiscal note says 125, and then it says 375 moving forward to 2029. And I guess I was confused in reading this because I read it as 125 and 375, or is it 125 and whatever additional to make the
Yeah, so the
or the 250?
125 was an original estimate in the fiscal note on the costs for DNR to implement the take back program, which DNR testified that they can handle the
Right.
take back program. And so
Existing,
it was 125 plus the $250,000
which is the
from the water,
375.
and that's where you get your 375.
Got it. Okay. I was confused. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we're assuming that with the fiscal note alteration, well, the approval alteration, that this may just be a 250 and not a 375
Correct.
fiscal note. Dylan?
Yeah, I'm not sure the specific answer to your question. The one thing, just to Delegate Jacobs asked the question in the bill hearing as well. If our boat, since this comes out of the special, this is special funds. If our bill to adjust the registration rates for vessels, we'll see an increase, and I think that would help provide any funding needed as well.
Right. Right.
But I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I did want to have a discussion about here we go. About SB 1055 and House Bill 1030, which is the agriculture roosters restrictions. Want to go ahead, Kristen?
Yeah. So we handed out the reprint on 1030 not too long before this meeting began. There's 2 amendments that were offered. The bill is prohibiting a person from keeping more than 5 roosters per acre or more than a total of 25 roosters on a single property, unless authorized by the Department of Agriculture. We have 2 amendments. One would clarify that the bill does not require the department to conduct additional inspections beyond those inspections required by law. And then it also would strike language directing the department to work in cooperation with local animal control or law enforcement. Instead, just authorizes the provisions of the bill to be enforced by the local authorities.
Any thoughts, any questions, any suggestions, any clarification? Delegate Jacobs, thanks.
Thank you. I don't have an issue with the purpose of the bill, which is the cockfighting issue, but I do have a problem with these numbers of 5 per acre and 25 per property. I don't think it's in the government's, it shouldn't be the government's authority to tell personal property owner how many chickens they can have on their property. If they want to deal with the cockfighting issue, I think that should be what the legislation says and intends to address. But to dictate how many chickens are on your property, I'm totally against.
So thank you for that, Delegate Jacobs. And that was a question that I did have as it relates to local jurisdictions. And Kristen and I actually were talking about this yesterday. So for instance, in Baltimore City, you have to have a permit, and that permit allows you to only have 4 chickens. And it restricts one having any rooster. Same thing in Baltimore County, but in Baltimore County, for instance, it is 4 chickens for every 10,000 square feet. And then when it goes to 20, there's 6. And then you go to 30,000 square feet, it's like 8. But again, no roosters. But then Kristen brought up the point, in Anne Arundel County, there are no provisions. So you can have chickens and roosters everywhere. And so,
well, sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize. I think it is based on the larger pieces of property. I think there could be restrictions on smaller.
Right. But to her point is that I was asking about, I assume most local jurisdictions, especially suburban and urban places, permit the allowance of chickens, and therefore how, whether it's MDA or local authorities or animal control, works through that process to know if, for instance, they go to a house and their chickens there or their roosters, for instance, it'd be, well, where's your permit? If they don't have a permit, then that would be, you know, a crackdown that way. But to the point, it could be that they just have chickens and they didn't go through the process. It may not necessarily be that there's quote unquote cockfighting. Delegate Allen, and then Delegate Teresa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But to your previous point, Madam Chair, I think the difference is, there's not a whole lot of legitimate reasons to have more than, one or two roosters, even with permits. Roosters do not produce eggs. They don't get along when there's more than one of them in close proximity. So I do understand the permitting concern. Sure. But like I said, I think this is kind of it's almost a parallel issue. And then if I may address Delegate Jacobs' concern, I actually, if I may just ask Delegate Jacobs himself, is there any number you would feel more comfortable with, Delegate, with a 5 and 25? Because I've spoken with the Humane Society. I can't speak for Senator Kramer, but I've spoken with the Humane Society, and they're okay adjusting those numbers higher if you feel more comfortable.
Well, if you look at it, and when it says 25, for one parcel, suppose you own 500 acres, then I think 25 is sort of ridiculous. I mean, I just have a problem with dictating a number, period. I just don't think, I think that's an overreach in dealing with the issue of cockfighting. If we're going to deal with that, then let's deal with what the issue is. But trying to dictate how many roosters you can have on your personal property, I just think is a reach.
Well, I think to Delegate Allen's point, I think to the greater point there, I think the legislation seeks to find a trigger point for local jurisdictions and animal control and potentially MDA, where they can actually then go in and be like, oh, hey, this is a trigger. Let me check and investigate. And it, to your point, Delegate Jacobs, or anybody's point, it could be nothing. But then the question becomes why someone would have just an X amount of roosters above and beyond the a potential allowable number, whether it's again allowed locally for third permitting process or not. And so I don't know any other reason for it, unless somebody just likes to have fresh chicken, fresh meat every day, or whatever. I don't know why else anyone would have so many roosters.
And the other piece to it, Madam Chair, and again, my conversations with the Humane Society and law enforcement as well, it's really, really hard when they seize a cockfight, not even like a cockfighting location, but a place where they're raising roosters for these purposes. It's still really, really, really hard to prove intent. And that's again the other piece of this that I think is the motivation to try to kind of ascribe intent to someone with an excessive number of roosters, not for educational or agricultural purposes on their property, for those reasons.
Right. Delegate Teresa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I understand what you're saying about local jurisdictions, and maybe we can put something in there that it doesn't, that a local jurisdiction can have fewer, like a requirement for even fewer, if that's the point. But I don't, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think Howard County has you have to do a registration of it. I think it's just a 4 chicken limit in certain areas. And I think it's higher than that, obviously, in farm area. But I guess for the reasons Delegate Allen was stating about sort of the difficulty of enforcement, I think this is really, really important, because of the difficulty of proving, that folks are breeding them for fighting, or that there's actually fighting going on.
Right.
So I'd like to see us pass it, even if we add something so there's that locals can have a more strict provision.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I would just point out that there is language in the bill that allows for the more stringent
right,
local
for
regulations.
local
Okay,
jurisdictions.
so then
Right,
that would,
it's page 3D1, I believe.
okay, great. So then I think, I mean, I support the bill as it is.
Okay. Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I do as well. And I really do want to say to Delegate Jacobs, I am almost always on the property rights side of things. I absolutely have a strong libertarian streak. And but I do feel as though this is one of those problems where unless you can go after the breeders, you really can't stop it. I think it's very similar to pit bull breeding. And it's not just the crime of cockfighting itself. It also seems to encompass a whole lot of other bad guy behaviors that we really don't want. And to me, this bill has a tremendous number of exemptions, including a very broad one. So I honestly think it would allow somebody to go to the county and say, look, and I agree with you, Delegate Boyce, I can't think of a reason either, but if there is, I'm sure there is one somewhere, and it would be perfectly possible to exempt a farm that had a legitimate reason. And it also seems hard for me to imagine a safe and humane rooster breeding operation larger than that, but so I support the bill as it is as well.
Sure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Delegate Ziegler. Delegate Baker.
Yes, I do have a lot of concerns with this bill. First of all, it mentions 1 acre, and I don't know if many of you and maybe you all know, an acre is 1 football field. So if I'm out in Western Maryland, you're going to restrict me to 5 roosters on 1 acre of ground. And if I am having chickens, to provide eggs and so forth for me, I have a hen sitting on 3 hens, each sitting on a dozen of eggs. They hatch. There's a good chance 50% of them are going to be roosters. So now I have 18 roosters. What am I supposed to do? Take 11 of those roosters or 13 of those roosters into the SPCA and drop them off? Am I supposed to abandon them? Am I supposed to how am I going to get rid of them? So
Delegate Baker, the bill specifies only adult roosters. I'm sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I don't want government telling me how many roosters I can have on my property if I'm not in the rooster fighting business. I have never heard of such things in Western Maryland. And also, does it address properties that have less than an acre?
That's a good question. And
So if
so
I have a lot that's 3/4 of an acre, you're telling me I can't have any roosters?
that's a good question, Delegate Baker. And I think the question that needs to be answered, and again, that I can't answer it because I don't have a permit for chickens. I don't have chickens. I certainly like eating chickens and I certainly like eggs. But is there a reason for someone to have, just for fun, 25, for instance,
If I want them
roosters?
and I'm taking great care of them, it's none of government's business. I have
Okay, that's not the point I'm making, sir. What I'm asking is, and this is not just for you, for
I
anybody, is
understand.
why would someone have 25 like roosters, just to have roosters, like no hens, just roosters?
If I meet and I have no chickens, I'm going to probably next year.
Okay,
And I don't know.
sure.
Rooster meat may be have more flavor and more enjoyable than hens. I don't know. Why would someone need 25 or 30 hens?
That's a good question. I mean, that's just a question I'm asking. That's so.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I have
it's a
no
question.
problem. I have no problem going after the people that are raising roosters for chicken fights, rooster fights. Go get them.
Yeah.
But as far as me, I don't want government telling me that I can't have 7 roosters on 3/4 of an acre if I have plenty of room. I'm taking great care of them. And I just think it's another government. This is me, a government
It's fine.
overreach.
You're,
And
thank you.
also, they were talking about local governments or local authorities could be more stringent. Why can't they be less stringent? Why can't they be, why can't the jurisdiction make up their own decision?
And I think to the point, some do and some just don't. I'm sorry, Delegate Ziegler, do you still have your hand up? Okay. Yeah, I mean, your hand is still up. I just
So
didn't.
for me, I just don't think I don't think the bill's ready to move forward. That's my
Yes,
opinion.
sir. Thank you so much. I appreciate you made a strong point about the acreage. I didn't think of it that way. Delegate Ruth and then Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also just am, I don't see how there, and I'd like to know how there could be, a legitimate reason for having more than that number of roosters, especially given that what we've heard that they don't coexist well, and so they need, additional space so that they can coexist. But also, I wanted to ask Rachel, maybe. Well, because this doesn't apply to commercial poultry producers, do you know how that's defined?
It's in the bill.
It just says it's defined in 8-704.2 and
Right. So we would just have to look that up. I mean,
yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. I can look it up, but I just thought somebody might know off the top of their head, because it's tough to look it up while in here.
Okay.
In any case, I also support this bill.
Kristen, do you want to give or Rachel want to give context around that? I just thought it's clearly defined what commercial is when that is put out there. So
I don't know off the top of my head. I can pull it up and we can look
Sure.
at it.
Mhm.
But off the top of my head, I just know it's a defined term in current law.
Right. Okay. Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in similar ilk of Delegate Baker, and there is legitimate reasons to have more chickens, be it male or female or otherwise. A lot of organic growers use them in a rotational grazing means for insect control and other things, and sort of as a fertilizing method as well. And that's for me to decide if I'm paying the taxes and all that, as long as I'm not being a nuisance to my neighbors. And certainly, we're talking about different breeds, and I just I think it's ridiculous to get into this, but I do think there's reasons for registering flocks of chickens, and that the department does already for disease problems or being able to isolate that. I mean, so they have some authority already and know where chickens are. And I would say if they're not registered and there's chickens there, they can already have authority to do something. So.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you giving context about why someone would have more roosters or chickens on their property. That was a pretty cool explanation. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do just want to address Delegate Otto's concern. Again, a commercial grower or, I think Delegate Ziegler said there is so the commercial growers are exempted. And as well, there's a rather large exemption that Delegate Ziegler referred to, and that says it is anyone who, anyone who possesses authorization from the county in which the roosters are located. So basically it's, the county, as long as the county has, a reason why that person is keeping more than 5 roosters per acre, 25 on the property, the breed, the duration, all that stuff, again, I view that as a pretty big a catch-all, again, for those with legitimate reasons.
Okay. Delegate Baker, you have another question or another comment?
Yes, I do.
Yes, sir.
You want to limit the number of roosters to a property owner to 25. What happens if my farm's 400 acres? One part,
I don't know if it's me or you, but
so I'm only
Frozen.
allowed 25 roosters. I mean, this bill is nowhere going to a vote, in my opinion. And, again, I know we're trying to address the bad guy. I think I'm a good guy, and here government's punishing the good guy again. So I really take offense to this bill, and I just don't think it's ready to move forward.
Okay.
That's just my position. Thank
Okay,
you.
so I think my connection is bad because Delegate Baker was literally talking in like high speed, so I don't know what was said, but I think I heard bits of it. It is 12 o'clock and we do have to close out because we have leadership meeting now, and I certainly thank everyone for this discussion. We may have one more meeting for straggler bills and to talk a little bit more about this one. So I do thank everyone for the conversation and discussion, and I've certainly learned a lot more information than I thought I was going to learn this time around. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
See you guys soon.
Okay, guys, soon.